Hello everyone, this is KherbsVO, and I want to give a huge shout out to Let's Read for having me on his channel for this video. I'm a voice actor, and feel free to give me a follow on Twitter at KherbsVO. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe to Let's Read's channel for consistent, high-quality audio horror entertainment.
I used to work a pretty boring secretary job here in Frankfurt. My boss, Jurgen, was a nice guy, never rude and never demanding, but working with him resulted in an incident which was probably the scariest and most disturbing of my entire life. One day, just after lunch break, Jurgen walked out of his office and told me to cancel all of his meetings for the remainder of the day. I told him I would, but then asked out of curiosity if there was any particular reason why. He told me he wasn't feeling very well and that he was going to try and focus himself as best he could so that the day wasn't a total waste. I told him that he should probably just go home and rest, but he shook his head at the idea and told me that if he really needed to, he'd take a nap in his office chair, considering it was a pretty swanky one. After that, I went ahead and canceled or rearranged his appointments, then went along with my own work until just before the office closed for the evening. He'd been really quiet for the whole day, not even buzzing me for water or anything, so I figured I'd just go check on him before I clocked out and headed home. I opened up the door of Jurgen's office, only to find that it was dark inside. I figured that he decided to take that nap that he was talking about, so before switching on the light, I whispered his name a few times to try and wake him before I so suddenly switched on the light. There was no reply, and I suppose that he must have been sleeping deeply, so I took it upon myself to turn on the light. What I saw when the light came on has haunted me almost every night since. It was more horrifying than any scary movie I've seen, or any ghost story I was ever told as a child. I've tried for years to get the image of it out of my head, with medicines and therapies and alcohol, but nothing has purged it from my mind. What I saw was a death mask. The last expression of a man's face before he was taken to his grave. My boss was dead, stone dead, and his face told the story of all the pain and agony he suffered before the lights in his eyes went out forever. Jurgen had suffered a heart attack, a catastrophic one. His mouth was wide open, and his eyes were rolled up so far in his head that his eyes appeared almost entirely bright white. There was a thick, almost gray foam caked around his lips and chin, and seeping out from the gap under his large, oaken desk was what I can only assume was all the urine contained in his bladder when he passed away. I let out a scream that could have woken the dead. Then as I ran from his office into the hallway, I ended up tripping on my heels and falling flat on my face. My colleagues had come running at the sound of my scream, and I remember sobbing as they picked me up and asked me what was wrong. All I could do was point towards our manager's office, and when one of them walked inside, they emerged just as quick as they walked in while screaming, "Somebody call 112, which is the emergency line here in Germany. The medics arrived very quickly, as our office building was only maybe half a mile from the nearest hospital, but I could have told them that Jurgen would be declared dead on arrival. We later heard that he had been dead for hours, that he'd suffered his heart attack maybe only an hour after telling me that he wasn't feeling himself. That part haunted me too, knowing that I'd been working just meters away from a corpse, and as he was dying, he'd been unable to call for help. We didn't even know that there was anything truly wrong until it was far too late to do anything about it, and I imagine the horror he experienced, knowing he was dying and that he too had no way of doing anything about it. When the memories return to me, as they often do, I am reminded that death is sometimes only hours away from some of us, how the only warning we get is the slight feeling of being unwell, then before you know it, you no longer exist. So, to preface, I would like to state that this story is probably going to read like the plot of a campy 1980s horror movie and is going to be very long. However, this entire story is true. If not for being 5 miles from cell reception and the way the story ends, there would be a police report for verification. I'll be changing names, locations, and some details in order to protect the privacy of the innocent. A buddy of mine and I try to camp twice a month now that I have a vehicle that can be trusted to get me to some of the more remote areas of our state. We planned a camping trip for the past weekend, from February 18th, 2021 to February 20th, 2021. We chose a fairly remote location we had been to the previous weekend. The previous weekend, we were the only people we'd seen within 1 mile of our camp spot. Friday night, we got there and set up. This story takes place Saturday night. It's about 9 p.m., so the sun is long gone and the moon hasn't quite risen yet. It's pitch black out, other than what our fire lights up. Suddenly, we hear a man screaming. We listen intently, silently sharing an anxious look. At first, we were hoping it was someone drunk and having a little too much fun, but it quickly becomes obvious this isn't fun party screaming. It isn't even like he's hurt. It sounds like full of despair, anger, and anguish. I'm going to take a moment to remind you that this is at 9 p.m., pitch black outside, in the middle of nowhere woods 5 miles from the nearest cell phone signal. We hadn't seen anyone in hours. The screaming continues for what felt like hours, but was probably around 5 solid minutes. We had no idea what to make of it and started feeling extremely paranoid. We gathered up anything remotely close to a weapon and tried to come up with explanations of the screaming while keeping our eyes on the forest around us. After about 15 tense minutes of fear-induced paranoia, I nearly fell out of my seat as I watched a flashlight and lantern slowly enter our camp. I greeted the stranger with a basic, "How's it going?" before he was even lit up by the fire. He responded quickly but flatly by asking if we could do him a favor. That depends on the favor," my buddy and I said in unison, obviously tense, holding our weapons close to us. The stranger proceeded to ask if he could hang out for a second by the fire. Given there's 2 of us and 1 of him, plus our myriad of weapons gathered from around camp to within our arm's reach, we decided to agree and let him hang out. After a short second of awkward silence, I ask him what's going on. He proceeds to tell me and my buddy that he was camping down the trail with his buddy and that his friend had snapped and tried to kill him. "Wait, what?" I said before the thought even finished processing in my head. "Is that the screaming we heard earlier?" The man slowly nods, staring blankly into the fire, and begins his story. "We were just hanging out, man. We came up earlier today and my buddy just freaked out. He started screaming and just wouldn't stop. And then he attacked me. He lunged at me, and I told him just to back off and chill, you know? Well, he kept coming after me, and it started getting pretty violent fast, and I'm pretty sure he was going to kill me, so I grabbed my car keys, the lights, and ran. I don't know what to do, man. He chased me when I ran, and I don't know what to do. We don't have firearms, anything, but we do have a hatchet." My buddy and I look at each other for a second, completely astonished, and then something horrible dawned on me. "Wait, he chased you? Like he's on his way here? Right now?" The man just slowly nods in reply, and right on cue, like some terrible horror movie come to life, we hear screaming maybe 30 to 40 feet from our camp, down on the main trail. "I just want your balance, Gary. I just want your balance. Gary! Gary! Where are you? Where? Gary!" I'd never in my life heard a man scream like this. I've never heard anything like it in my life. It was a brutal, guttural scream that was shrill to the ears yet deep in pitch. The sound of someone gone completely mad. And the way he said the stranger's name would switch erratically from long and sing-songy to short, guttural punches of sound. We killed our lights, became silent and listened. By some miracle, the madman didn't notice our camp and continued walking down the trail, screaming the whole way. We ended up chatting with who we'll call Gary for hours, listening to the screaming getting further and further. Come to find out, They had taken 4.5 to 5 grams of magic mushrooms each, and his buddy, who we'll call Ty, was a coworker of his and was fine for about 3.5 hours, then just suddenly snapped. It seems as if though Ty thought he could kill Gary and steal his good trip. We hear the screams get further and further for over 2 hours. By this time it's 11 p.m. The moon is starting to come out, and it's below 30 degrees Fahrenheit. Ty had no jacket or flashlight according to Gary. My buddy and I are way too drunk to drive out of camp to get cell service, as it was snowy and icy and required 2 to 3 miles of highway driving after getting off the trail. And Gary was still lightly feeling the effects of weed and mushrooms, so he couldn't drive either. We had to make the decision to let the guy wander, hope he'd sobered up and could find his way back. And he did. Oh, he did, right into our camp. We hear yelling after about an hour of no screams, maybe 30 to 50 feet from our camp again.
Hey! Help! Please help, I'm lost!
And we can tell the man's walking from the woods into our camp. We tell Gary to hide just in case, and greet the man with me carrying my 12-gauge shotgun and my .40 pistol holstered. My buddy was carrying his AK-47 style rifle and his 2 9mm Glocks holstered, and with our flashlights on our brightest settings in his face. He was maybe 6'3", 300 pounds. We talked to him, decided he was calm enough to walk with, and walked him back to his camp. He seemed really remorseful, said he blacked out and didn't remember anything, and had a falling out with his buddy. We escorted him back to his camp down the trail, returned and told Gary that Ty seemed cool, and if anything else happened to scream and come running, we would come out and help him out. It ended up being a happy ending. We made friends with Gary, and I got his phone number to make sure the next day that he got into town safely, back to his wife and kid, and we're actually planning a camping trip with him soon. But Ty, who wandered screaming like a deranged maniac into the forest, potentially wielding a hatchet to murder your friend to steal his good trip, or whatever it is your psychosis-filled mind was thinking, for the love of God, let's not meet again. This story happened a few years ago. I was in my early 20s and was studying in Paris, France. I was going home from uni. I usually took a short bus ride and walked the rest of the way. That day, I felt slightly uncomfortable. I could sense some guy was looking intensely at me. I was used to unpleasant, unsolicited gazes, but this time, his gaze felt beastly, I guess you could say. It's hard to explain why, but I felt like a prey being stalked. I decided to get off the bus a few stops early. I wanted to avoid him and didn't want him to see where I usually got off. Like I learned in the movies, I waited until someone else pressed the stop button and waited until the last moment to stand up and leave. I didn't notice him getting off the bus. Just as I was feeling the relief of having escaped an uncomfortable situation, I look over my shoulder and there he was, a few meters behind. I had the distressing feeling his eye had just looked away the moment I turned. I walked into a shop, took my phone and pretended to be taking a call. When I couldn't see him anymore, I exited and made my way home as fast as I could. I kept looking back in the busy street. I zigzagged, crossed the street at every crossing. Finally, I believed that him getting off at the same stop as me was just a coincidence. When I reached my building, I looked back one last time, and there he was, his alarming gaze on me, and he was smirking. I ran up to my apartment, climbing the stairs 4 at a time. I reached the top floor, squeezed through my door, locked it, and froze. My intercom was ringing. Don't ask me why I picked it up. I regretted it in the moment I did. I could hear the opposite flat intercom ringing as well. He had pressed all the buttons one by one, hoping someone would open. But now, he said my name. Gabriella. Oh God. I felt like a deer in the headlights, frozen.
Open your door, please,
said a pleading voice.
I just want to talk to you.
Somehow I couldn't move or speak.
Come to the window.
he added.
Look at me. You'll see, I'm not a bad guy.
Something clicked. He wanted to locate my apartment in the building. I was not going to make that mistake. I hung up, in shock. I waited by the door without moving for what seemed like hours. When I finally managed to calm myself, I called my long-distance boyfriend. "Call the police," he said immediately. Why didn't I call the police? I don't know. Today would be the first thing I would do. The fear of making a big deal out of something not important, perhaps, is what was going through my mind at the time, and maybe I just felt confused. And what an idiot I was. I called my best friend instead. I didn't want to feel alone. I told her all about it, and after a while I felt better. I felt safe. We started laughing, and suddenly the intercom rang again. 2 hours had passed since I'd come home. I answered.
Gabriella,
said the voice.
Open, please.
I still remember the chills I felt. He was still there. He was there all this time. I was silent, petrified. He was silent, but I could sense his trepidation.
Gabriella, let me in. I'm so thirsty,
he said.
Just give me a glass of water.
This broke the tension, and I hung up. Curled up in a corner, literally in recovery position, I was terrified. I waited. I was scared to make a sound. I knew he couldn't hear me from the hall, but I was too scared to even breathe. The intercom rang again, and again. I didn't answer this time. I crouched on the sofa and fell asleep from exhaustion. I heard the intercom ring one more time in the middle of the night. I woke up in the morning, afraid to leave my apartment. I called my dad, who came to pick me up. There was no one in the hall, but there was a note in my mailbox. It read, "Gabriella, I'm a nice guy. You should have opened to me." We immediately went to the nearest police station. The police listened and of course told me that I should not hesitate to call them next time. My dad called a locksmith to install digicode on the building door the same day and wrote a message to each of my neighbors asking not to open the door to anyone they didn't expect. He sat in the cafe in front of my building with 2 friends every evening for more than a week, and I never saw the stalker again. After this little episode, I used a different route to and from university every day. I kept my phone tightly in my hand and looked back every few meters. Today I'm still very observant to my surroundings. I never answer the door if I'm not expecting someone. And people, if you ever find yourself in any kind of uncomfortable situation, just call the police. Don't be an idiot like me. For context, I'm in school still and work for my family member on certain weekends at a local college selling concessions at the stadium. It's about once to twice a month, and the stadium is off towards the edge of town. It's Friday night. I just had gotten out of school and had to go straight to work. I get to work for 4 hours, half shift tonight, and my boss, who is also my aunt, tells me we need more spoons for tomorrow's event. We sell ice cream, and these events have like 5,000 plus people at them. I say okay, I'll go grab them on my way home. The only store open with heavy-duty spoons is all the way on the other side of town, and I still wanted to go meet up with some of my friends and mess around. I decide to take the faster but more sketchy way around the outskirts of town. I live in a weather bipolar state. It snowed last night, but I figured the roads would be fine enough even if they weren't plowed. I take off to the store, and the first 5 minutes go by and nothing's wrong. I haven't seen a single car or any buildings the entire time. But keep in mind, it's approaching 9 p.m. and I'm on the outskirts of town, and no one really takes this way in case they really have to. All of a sudden, I see something out of the corner of my eye, and it appears to be a man. Roughly 5'8", I'd say, wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and a backwards hat. He's in the ditch, walking in the snow when it's 10 degrees out. My first thought is to pull over, but I'm on the phone with my mom at the time, and she warns me not to, as some things have happened before in this town. For example, a couple years ago, a college girl was kidnapped, and found dead rolled up in a rug in 2014. I considered stopping, but for some reason I tell myself not to. I wasn't really worried about anything. I'm a young dude driving a big pickup truck. Last type of person anyone would want to harm, right? I passed the man, going about 40 miles per hour. Like I said, the roads aren't the best. I drive not even 500 feet past him, and immediately, a car that I did not see at all before turns on and pulls out of a field entrance off the road and starts to follow me. At first, I thought I was just focused on the man in the ditch and didn't see a road, and that's where they came from. But I later found out that there was not a road there. Now, again, I'm not super worried. I've watched my fair share of crime movies and read plenty of stories on this sub, and I didn't feel that it was a threat yet. I start to approach the town again and have to take some turns to get where I'm going. I turn left, the car turns left. I turn right, car turns right. I go around a roundabout and skip my turn and go twice as no one else was there. The car follows. At this point, I start to worry a little, but maybe they just need to go to the store also. I then pull up to a stop sign. I wasn't on the best side of town either, may I add, and I turn without my turn signal, and the car continues to follow. Now, at this point, I should have went straight to the police station, but I still didn't think much of it. I'm 2 miles from the store where plenty of people will be. I take a few more turns and the car continues to follow me. I completely blew a stop sign at a non-busy intersection and the car does a quick stop and go and catches up. At this point, I'm 2 turns till the store, so I'm still not worried. I turn into the store and the car turns also. The store also has a gas station, so I pull there first to act like I was getting gas. The car sits off to the side of the road in between the gas station and store and just sits there. I wait about 10 minutes and the car doesn't move. At this point, I start to get worried. I'm a young kid alone at night near the bad side of town. I call my friends I'm supposed to meet up with later on and give them the license plate for worst case scenario, and then take off to the store. I cross the street and the car comes straight behind me. I'm freaking out on the phone, not knowing if I should call the cops or not. I go and park as close as possible to the store, and the car parks 3 rows behind me and a couple down. It's getting late at this point and the store is closing soon. There's only a couple others in the lot. I turn my truck back on and go park on the complete opposite side of the lot, get out, and I just bolt inside of the store. I'm not super overweight, but I'm not skinny either. I'm about 6'1" and 200 pounds. Who would want anything to do with me? I get spoons and take my time in the store. I go to call my friends to walk back outside and my phone is dead. I look out the sliding doors and suddenly there's a white van next to my driver's side. Looks like no one's in it, but the back windows are covered and it appears to be running. This was a huge red flag. I run to customer service and explain everything, but they think I'm some young kid messing around. At the time, I didn't see the original following car, but no way am I going outside with that van next to my truck. After waiting for what seemed like hours but was only 30 minutes, the van pulls forward and the original car appears from inside of the building. You can see from in the store Starbucks window, they talked and just both drove off. I waited another 10 minutes and dash outside. I speed to my friend's house, and when I get there, I park in his garage. My one buddy asked why there's a big orange mark on my tire, and my heart sinks. When I was inside, the follower car must have marked my tire. After inspecting the rest of my truck, we find a small pipe dropped in the bed of my truck surrounded by snow. It was about 2 inches wide, and I'd say about 18 inches long, wrapped in duct tape. It was not mine. I was alone, no phone, scared in a part of town I'm not familiar with. I try to laugh it off, but now that everyone's asleep, I can't help but think what would have happened if I walked outside. I've always been sort of ego-boosted on the fact that I'm a chubby fat dude that no one would want to mess with. But after tonight, I realize anyone can be targeted. So this just happened to me I'm a female, 28 years old, and I am sure I will not be able to sleep. My boyfriend is not answering the phone, and I just need to get this out. My company organized an event for the clients and the staff at a luxury hotel. Everyone partied, and I got into my room about an hour ago. It's about 3:27 a.m. in the morning here. I don't know. 15 minutes ago, a guy just entered my room with a bottle of water. It woke me up, and I was super scared. He says someone called my room to order a bottle of sparkling water. It's a weird explanation. There's a minibar, and there is a corridor in the room before entering where I'm in the bed. So basically, I'm half naked in my bed. He comes closer to me at the level of the table, apologizing for the inconvenience, but he's still here. And I kid you not, he starts talking to me, saying how he's going to be in trouble, etc., and how someone called and he's so sorry, and the others got into the hotel super drunk and it must have been a mistake. I swear that he's just been standing super close to my bed for over 5 minutes, giving excuses and not leaving. And I was so shocked that I was just saying, no, it's okay, I just got scared, really, it's no problem, just go. Well, he says he doesn't see me well, so he asked my name, twice. He says,
"Oh, so I guess I'll wish you a good night then."
and he kisses me on the cheek, like we French normally do, but once again, I'm half naked in my bed, dead scared, and he's in a suit all dressed. Literally, I don't even know what I could have done. He left after the longest minutes, saying how he was sorry and how he would appreciate that I don't tell anyone. And now the phone in the room just rang. I don't know if I still should be scared. Was he just confused by the mistake? I'm super scared though. I cannot think right now and my heart is still racing. I just need to have some rational feedback after all of this. A little bit of background. I, a 23-year-old female, was 20 at the time. I moved in with my uncle in San Antonio, Texas, with the agreement that I didn't have to pay rent as long as I helped him out with chores and my cousins. I got a job at a super known coffee chain downtown close to the touristy part of the area. We had a lot of regulars and a lot of homeless coming in and out. I felt relatively safe though because I got to know the people there and it was almost always a lot of foot traffic. I used to even take walks after work in the area, especially since I was super close to the Riverwalk. Skip to a couple of months into the job and I was friends with everyone I worked with. We were all super close, and on this particular day it was one of my coworkers' last day. There was about 3 guys who had been in there almost all morning. They hadn't bought anything and were just hanging out, which was not unusual for my location. On my break, I decided to walk down to a nearby drugstore so I can get a farewell card and maybe a small gift for said coworker. I walked out and put my earphones in, and before I could press play, I hear the door open behind me and footsteps following behind. Whoever it was caught up to me and started walking beside me, matching my pace exactly. I turned to look, and it was one of the guys that had been there all morning. He was a bit taller than me and reminded me a lot of Lakeith Stanfield. He tried to ask for my number, and I kindly told him no. He persisted, and I, with a short temper, told him to screw off. He stopped and stared at me in surprise, as I don't look like someone who speaks up or is ever rude. He stood there as I walked away, and by the time I went back, they were gone. I proceeded to tell my coworkers about the encounter, and we just kind of laughed it off. I thought that would be the end of it, and I was wrong. Every shift after that, he would already be there just hanging out or would walk in mid-shift. Sometimes with somebody else and sometimes by himself. I assumed he was just another homeless person because how else was he able to just be around? My shifts were sporadic. Some days I opened, some days I closed, and some days I worked mid, but it didn't matter. He was always there. At that point, I started feeling paranoid. I would always catch him staring in my direction. He never ordered anything, never talked to me, and luckily wouldn't follow me. He would just sit there watching me. I started mentioning it to my coworkers and they started noticing it too. One of my team leaders would help me out by sending me to wash dishes in the back or organize the cooler. My coworkers would also try and place themselves to try and block me from his view. I started feeling uncomfortable at work now. Sometimes when I closed, a coworker would walk me to my car before heading home themselves. Or if I didn't close, they would walk me to my car and turn around and head back to work. Then one day of him just staring, I was working the register that day. He walked up and ordered a water. I asked for his name for his order. I now had his first name just in case. He took his water and sat down. I had mentioned him before to my manager, but because he hadn't really done anything, we wouldn't do anything besides note it in the manager book. The next day I worked with my manager. It was him, 2 other coworkers, and me. I told them I had to go to the bathroom real quick. There were 2 bathrooms right next to each other, but sort of hidden from the coffee bar and register, and they weren't gender specific. I walked around the bar to the lobby area. I had to pass his table and walk down the lobby to get to the bathrooms. I noticed him get up before going inside the bathroom. I sat down to do my business when someone rattled the doorknob. I shouted out that it was occupied, but whoever it was kept rattling the door until I finished. When I opened the door, no one was there, and walking back, I noticed him adjusting back into his chair. I was super freaked out and told my boss. He couldn't tell him anything because we had no proof that it was him. Later that shift, he got up and picked up a coffee from the pickup area. My boss assumed he had ordered it and let him take it. I told him it wasn't and that it wasn't even his name. My boss used this as an opportunity to tell him if he does something like that again, he can't come back. The man apologized and actually stuck to the rules every day after that. He went back to just watching me. Cut to Valentine's Day. One of my team leaders and I would be scheduled to work certain Thursdays after close to deep clean the store, and we would stay until 1 a.m. This was one of those Thursdays. We were almost done, and I had to clean the bathrooms as one of the last chores. I finished, and as I walked out of the bathroom, I see him peeking in with both his hands pressed to the windows, eyes wide, just staring at me with a super intense look. I froze for a second, just staring back. I notice on one of his palms that is pressed to the window a purple foam heart. He doesn't move at all. I freak out and step back into the bathroom. I start shouting, "Hannah, Hannah, he's here, he's back," and she barely hears me through the music that we were blasting. Hannah was the team lead who would help me hide from him, so she knew the huge fear I had towards him. She walked towards the bathroom shouting, "What are you saying? What's going on?" And as soon as she gets close, she sees him. I tell her again, "He's here. He's watching me." She started shouting through the window, "You need to leave. If you don't leave, we're calling the police." I step out a little to see if he'll leave, and he's ignoring her, and his eyes were just fixated in my direction. I step back into the bathroom, and my lead continues to shout at him to leave and threatens him with the police. About 5 minutes passes, and he realizes that I'm not stepping out until he leaves, so he does. The next day, my lead and I told our manager that I wanted to file a police report, and he tells me no, to wait until he talks to his boss. He shows up again that day, but I was only there to talk to my manager and leave right after. When I got home, a friend convinced me to just call the cops. I text my boss that I don't care what he or his boss says, that I'm scared and I'm going to file that police report. I dial 911 and tell them a summarized version, and they tell me that they're going to send someone to where I live to take the official report. The 2 officers were incredibly nice and supportive. I told them my whole story and how my boss didn't feel the need to get cops involved since I wasn't harmed. The officers told me that I should have called right away and defend me, saying that they can get him for harassment. I thank them, and they tell me that if he shows up to dial 911 so they can take him in for trespassing and harassing. I think that day my manager banned him and warned him because he never showed up to the coffee shop again. A few months later, when I was comfortable again with downtown, I went out with some friends to walk around. We were close to where I worked, and as we round a corner, I see him, and so I ducked into a little corner store and my friends follow. I told them I saw him and they kept an eye out. Once he was out of view, we left the store, and that was the last time that I saw him. I'm the Duffy in any friend group I'm in. I never worried about being hit on, disrespected, or kidnapped. I never had to worry about my own safety when going out, as I was never the one anyone wanted to get to know or be around because I'm so plain and it's always me that has to be on the lookout for my friends, male and female alike. Now, I like to go to a local bar almost daily. I don't drink alcohol there, I just get a normal Coke and wait for my ride home. It's my usual hangout spot after work, so I just sit and chill and mind my own business. Well, a few weeks ago, I had just gotten off of work and was chilling at my usual spot and sipping on my drink while working on a new pendant that I was making. I started wire wrapping crystals into jewelry. I didn't think anyone would try to talk to me since I knew I basically blended into the walls, even though the staff knew me and pay me slight attention and are nice to me. But this weird guy I'd never seen before came over and sat at my table across from me. I was surprised and looked up at him and struck up a small conversation that I can't even remember how I started, but he started to ask me a few questions about myself that I thought were normal and all flowed together, so I didn't think much of it. Again, I'm plain and didn't think anyone would want anything to do with me. I had drank 3 glasses of soda by then and had to use the bathroom, so I grabbed my phone and purse and went to the bathroom. I may not have worried about being abducted, but I did worry about my identity, cash, and contacts being taken. I went back a few minutes later and went back to working, since none of my stuff had been touched. I called a waitress over and asked her for a new drink, and she nodded, as it had always been ingrained in me that you never leave your drink unattended, and if you do, have it just remade or leave it to the bartender. As she was going to grab for my old drink, which only had a few sips taken from it, the guy got a bit huffy at me, saying that I was being wasteful for just ordering a new drink. I looked at him with a raised eyebrow in confusion. I asked him why it was his business if I did. It was my money after all, and the refills were free. He then said that I was making more work for the waitress for no reason. This annoyed me, and I told him again that it was my business and that if he didn't like it, he could always leave. He then tried to wave the waitress off with letting her change my drink, but I'd had enough of his nonsense and told him flat out, "Then you drink it, if you think it's such a waste." It seemed to have caught him off guard, and he looked at me shocked, then a bit angry before just leaving. I then looked at the drink and handed it to the waitress and told her that something didn't feel right about the guy that I was talking to, and if she could tell the bartender to keep an eye on him and dump out my drink and just bring me water from then on. I left for home after being picked up shortly after and found out the next day after work that he had been arrested for assault. I didn't find out till today exactly what happened. Apparently he had gotten into a fight with the bartender working that night. The bartender caught him putting something into a girl's drink when she wasn't looking, and he stopped her from drinking it. The guy got angry and it started a whole thing. The cops were called, and now apparently he's awaiting trial. Apparently, he was trying to see if he could get someone like me who always had her guard down for herself because my confidence was so low. He thought I'd be an easy mark with just a little attention, but when I didn't just drink my drink when I came back, he had to try it on another girl. If he really was targeting me, I have to question his sanity and sobriety. I used to work at a small neighborhood gas station. I was working an opening shift at 6 a.m. with my best friend and coworker. We were doing our normal opening stuff, and as the sun came up, I went to get some ice from the back. For reference, the gas station building used to have a drive-through, so we have that kind of window in the back. I glanced at that back window and realized there was a literal bloody handprint on the back window. I looked closer and there were smudges of blood around the window handle that looked like someone was definitely attempting to slide it open. We were really freaked out, so we went to look around other potential entrances around the building. I looked at the window in front and noticed dried blood on the hole where we take money for gas from outside, like someone was trying to stick their hand in to get something inside. I keep looking around and there was also dried blood on the front door handles, plus some splatters on the glass like someone was pounding on the glass. My friend and I were both freaking out at this point. So, Luckily, I had access to the security cameras and I checked them for any motion detected during the night. At 5 a.m., there was a motion captured, and we watched as a man with his arms covered in blood walked around the store trying to get in. The freakiest thing was usually the store is opened at 5 a.m., but it happened to be Sunday, so we opened at 6. Really dodged a bullet there. There were police lights in the distance on the cameras, so we called the sheriff. He showed up pretty quick, watched the security footage, and confirmed it was a guy they picked up just a bit after 5:30 a.m. The craziest thing that happened to me in my 3.5 years of working at gas stations. Several years back, I was cleaning out my house. I was renting a house for a year, and this year was almost up. I wasn't going to be living there the next year, so it was time for me to start cleaning out and moving my stuff to my next place. The house that I had at the time was fairly small, but it was plenty of space for just me. I lived there by myself, and I had just finished cleaning out the living room, other than some basic furniture, and I had moved on to clean the kitchen. There were quite a few cabinets, so many that I didn't use a good number of them. I was looking through some of the old ones I didn't use to make sure that there was nothing I had in them. One of them I opened up, and I saw something in the back corner. It looked like some type of shirt or rag. I grabbed it and saw that I didn't think it was mine, but when I moved, it revealed a small white lever that I could barely see. The cabinet was in the corner, sorted by the sink and halfway blocked by the stove. I thought it was just another pipe, but it just looked a little different to me. I got inside and had to crawl inside the cabinet, which was pretty large. Once I got inside, I saw that there was a small trap door to the side leading into the wall. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You had to be completely inside in order to see the detail of it, and I decided to open the door, which led to an extremely narrow hallway with a sort of crawl space. But when I got further inside, I was horrified. I saw that there was food, as well as several blankets, as if someone had been living inside there. The good news, at least to me, is that whoever was in there was gone. I tried to make sense of it and figured out how long the person had been there and how I didn't know about it. I was gone from the house a lot with work and other stuff, but I didn't know how it was possible for someone to live in there without me knowing. I continued cleaning until it got pretty late, and the next day after work I continued. I was still kind of in shock with finding a secret room in my house and decided to look at it once again. I opened the cabinet and went inside, then I pulled the lever open just like I had the previous day. By this time, as soon as I opened it, I saw movement and then saw a person for a split second. They slammed the door back shut on me, and I immediately turned and ran all the way out of my house to my car and called the police. I was so scared that I started driving away as well. I told the police the whole situation, and they came to my house a short time later to find that whoever had been there was now long gone. Luckily for me, I moved out the next week. I really don't know how long that person was living in my secret room, but thankfully, it never gave me a problem. So about a year and a half ago, I was 16. I had taken on a job of babysitting my aunt's dog in the Bronx whilst she was away on business. I don't exactly know the breed, but this dog was a powerhouse more than capable of taking someone down. Her name is Dolly. I had to introduce myself to her in my aunt's presence to ensure she knew who I was before showing up alone later. I was told to walk her about 4 times a day. She's very well trained, doesn't bark really, which is what makes this encounter even more creepy. It was late, like 2 a.m., and she adorably woke me up for a walk by digging her nose into my arm. When we began our walk, it was really dark out. You wouldn't be able to see anyone's face from a few feet away, it was that dark. The streets were empty, but that's expected at 2 a.m. In this suburban kind of area in the Bronx, the sidewalks are very narrow. You can't walk down in twos. Dolly was slow because she liked to smell literally every molecule on the sidewalk. Here's the creepy encounter, though. There was a man who was walking down the same sidewalk as us, maybe about 10 feet behind. Dolly went off the sidewalk to where the grass was to sniff a tree. I knew with her that could take years to be done with, so I kind of signaled the man, who was a lot closer now, to go on by, and I stepped off the narrow sidewalk onto the grass. And I was right. Dolly took forever sniffing this tree. Genuinely think it was about 10 to 15 minutes. I didn't have a problem with it taking long because I was listening to good music with AirPods, and watching her go around this tree was an enjoyable sight. Then all of a sudden, Dolly begins barking ferociously at someone behind me. It startled the crap out of me because it was so abrupt, and I hadn't even seen her bark like that ever. I quickly turned around to see what would make her do this, and there was the same man. He hadn't gone any more forward in the direction he was coming in since I signaled him to pass. Still about 5 feet away, he wasn't on his phone. He was standing there just looking at me. Dolly was going crazy at him, and he had little to no reaction. Now I got a closer look at him. He was very tall, taller than me, and I'm 6'3". He was bald, and his face was expressionless, although half of it was covered by the darkness of the night. I realized that the dude must have just stood there staring at me for 10 to 15 minutes as well. He definitely wasn't trying to talk to me in that time because my music wasn't that loud. I would have heard him. And I don't think he was admiring the dog, because even with her barking, his eyes were still zoned in on me. We had about a 10-second moment of staring each other in the face. Normally I would have asked him if he needed something, but I just had the worst feeling ever. He right away reminded me of the dancing tall, smiley man creepypasta story, which I think was the cause for my fear in that moment. I turned from him and felt safe with this ginormous dog. I took my AirPods out of my ears so I could hear if he followed. Dolly walked with me, but her eyes stayed on him the whole time. Instead of continuing down the same street, I crossed the block. As I started to do this, I kid you not, this man absolutely sprinted in the opposite direction he was originally heading in. The sound of his feet rapidly hitting the floor sent an uppercut to my guts. I quickly turned around and watched him do this. He ran as if his life depended on it. I watched him run till he turned the corner and out of view. I held Dolly's leash tight and hurried back to the house. I don't think he followed, but Dolly kept looking back and growling. When we got back, I locked the door and made sure Dolly slept in bed with me.
This is a hometown story that stayed with me. I'm from Martinsville, Indiana. So this all happened literally right around the corner from where I grew up. No more than maybe a 5 minutes walk away from where I'm typing this at my computer. Judy Kirby murdered 6 children and 1 adult by driving the wrong way on a divided highway in what some say was a kind of suicide attempt. But ask anyone in Martinsville, and they'll just tell you that Judy was off her rocker, and had been for a long time. She had been hospitalized for depression, but her love life was, well, how can I phrase this? It was like something off of the Jerry Springer show. At the time of her death, she just ended a relationship with her ex-husband's brother, and a lot of people suspected that she was involved in drug trafficking, and was only so crazy because she was around meth kitchens all the time. She picked up her sister's son, who was celebrating his 10th birthday that day. She then loaded her 3 children into the car, supposedly to pick up a gift for the nephew. Instead, she went missing with the carload of kids. A short time later, calls started coming in to 911 about a car going the wrong way down the highway. Some people say she was about to be busted and took the kids as hostages or something. She was planning on taking them somewhere, but only releasing them when she had a ticket out of the country. But she never made it that far. They made it about 90 seconds before a head-on collision with another vehicle driven by a father with 2 children and another child along for the ride. The crash annihilated both vehicles. I'm talking full-on explosion on impact. The only survivors were Kirby herself and a kid from the other car she hit. Aside from that, People say there were literally pieces of kids all over the highway. She was sentenced to 215 years in prison, which, if you ask me, is lenient as hell considering exactly what she did. Like, I sympathize with anyone going through emotional or mental problems. But to put children in danger like that, to do something that takes their young lives away, to me, that's the very definition of unforgivable.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. I release new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r/LetsReadOfficial, and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations and bonus content over on Patreon, or click that big join button to hear about the extra perks offered for the channel. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in big compilations and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the description below. Thanks so much, friends. And remember, Squawk 1, checking in.